My name is Sarah, and for 28 years, I believed my parents were just struggling to make ends meet. I believed their story about how Grandma Rose had died without leaving much behind, how the funeral costs had eaten up most of her modest savings, and how we all just had to accept that some people weren't meant to be wealthy. I believed it all, right up until the day I accidentally discovered the truth that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. It started on a Tuesday morning in March. I was visiting my parents' house to help my mom with some spring cleaning when she asked me to grab some old financial documents from Dad's study to shred. I was rifling through a stack of papers when a letterhead caught my eye. Whitmore and Associates, estate planning attorneys. The date was from 3 years ago, right after Grandma Rose's funeral. My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter. The words seemed to blur together at first, but then they came into sharp, devastating focus. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Chen, we are pleased to inform you that the estate settlement for Rose Chen has been completed. As per the will, the inheritance of $847,000 has been transferred to your account as temporary trustees for your daughter Sarah Chen, to be released to her upon her 25th birthday. The paper slipped from my numb fingers and fluttered to the floor. $847,000. Grandma Rose had left me nearly $1 million, and I had turned 25 3 years ago. My parents had been sitting on my inheritance for 3 years, letting me struggle through graduate school with student loans, watching me work 3 part-time jobs just to afford rent on a studio apartment that barely had hot water. I sank into Dad's leather chair, the expensive leather chair that I now realized had been bought with my money, and tried to process what I was reading. The will was clear. The money was mine, held in trust only until I reached 25. There were detailed instructions about the investments Grandma had made, the properties she'd owned, even a provision for a financial advisor to help me manage it responsibly. None of it had ever reached me. My throat felt like sandpaper as I heard my mother's footsteps approaching the study. Sarah, honey, did you find those papers? She called out cheerfully. I quickly folded the letter and slipped it into my purse, my heart hammering against my ribs. Yeah, Mom. Just finishing up. The rest of that day passed in a haze. I sat through dinner with my parents, listening to Dad complain about the rising cost of their country club membership and Mom discussing plans for their upcoming cruise to Europe. Meanwhile, I was calculating in my head, with interest and proper investment, my inheritance should have grown significantly over the past 3 years. They had stolen not just my grandmother's gift to me, but years of financial freedom, of choices, of the life I could have built. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times I'd called my parents, stressed about money, the time I'd had to drop out of a graduate program because I couldn't afford the tuition, the time I'd gotten sick and avoided going to the doctor because I didn't have health insurance, the countless nights I'd survived on ramen noodles while my parents were apparently living it up on my inheritance. But what hurt most wasn't the money itself. It was the lies. Every time I'd struggled, every time I'd asked for help, they'd looked me in the eye and told me they wished they could do more. They'd made me feel guilty for even asking, made me believe I was being unreasonable to expect any support from family. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Whitmore and Associates. I need to speak with someone about my grandmother's estate, I told the receptionist, trying to keep my voice steady. Rose Chen. 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Mr. Whitmore himself, a distinguished man in his 60s who looked deeply uncomfortable as he reviewed my case. Miss Chen, he said carefully, I have to ask, haven't your parents discussed the inheritance with you? That's exactly what I'm here to find out, I replied. His face grew grave as he pulled out a thick folder. Your grandmother left very specific instructions. The inheritance was to be held in trust by your parents only until your 25th birthday, at which point full control was to transfer to you. That was. He checked his calendar. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days ago. The room felt like it was spinning. So legally, the money should have been mine 3 years ago. Not should have been. Is legally. That money has been yours for over 3 years. Your parents were required to transfer it immediately upon your 25th birthday. He leaned forward, his expression serious. Miss Chen, if they haven't done so, they are in violation of the trust agreement and potentially guilty of financial fraud. I spent the next 2 hours in that office, learning about my grandmother's investments, her properties, and her detailed plans for my future. She had left me letters my parents had never given me, letters explaining her hopes for my education, her desire to see me travel and experience the world, her pride in the woman she knew I would become. By the time I left the attorney's office, I had copies of everything: the will, the trust documents, the investment records, and most importantly, documentation showing that my inheritance had grown to over $1.2 million with proper management over the past 3 years. I also had something else: a plan. Mr. Whitmore had explained my options. I could demand immediate transfer of the funds, which would likely result in legal proceedings against my parents. I could file criminal charges for fraud and theft. Or, he suggested with a knowing look, I could be more strategic about how I handled the situation. Your grandmother, he said, was a very wise woman. She included some provisions in her will that I think you'll find interesting. That's when he showed me the clause I had missed in my initial shock. If her trustees ever acted improperly with the inheritance, there were severe penalties, including the requirement to pay back double the amount with interest, plus legal fees. More importantly, Grandma Rose had made provisions for exactly this scenario. She had created a separate, smaller trust that would only activate if the main inheritance was mismanaged. This backup plan included detailed instructions for what she called teaching moments, ways to ensure that anyone who betrayed her trust would learn the full weight of their actions. I spent the next 2 weeks conducting my own investigation. I hired a private financial investigator, something I could finally afford, thanks to an emergency disbursement from my inheritance that Mr. Whitmore helped me secure. What we discovered was worse than I had imagined. My parents hadn't just stolen my inheritance. They had been systematically draining it for 3 years. The country club membership, the European vacations, the new cars, the kitchen renovation, even their recent investment in a vacation rental property. All of it had been funded with my money. But here's what they hadn't counted on. Grandma Rose had been just as cunning as she was wealthy. The trust included a clause that automatically documented every expenditure, every withdrawal, every investment made with the funds. There was a paper trail for everything. My parents had been living it up on nearly $400,000 of my inheritance, thinking they were clever, thinking I would never find out. They had no idea that every dollar they spent was being meticulously recorded by the trust's management company. The financial investigator also discovered something else. My parents were in debt. Serious debt. Their lavish lifestyle had outpaced even my substantial inheritance, and they had taken out loans and credit cards to maintain appearances. They were mortgaged to the hilt, and several of their recent purchases were financed with the assumption that they would continue to have access to my trust fund. That's when I realized the beautiful irony of the situation. They had stolen my financial security, but in doing so, they had destroyed their own. It was time for the confrontation. I chose to do it at Sunday dinner, surrounded by the expensive furniture and artwork they had purchased with my money. My mother had prepared an elaborate meal, organic ingredients from the gourmet market, fine wine, the works. All of it paid for with funds that should have been helping me build my own life. "This is delicious, Mom," I said, taking a bite of the herb-crusted salmon. It must have been expensive. She waved dismissively. Oh, you know how it is. We've been doing well lately. Your father got a bonus at work. Dad nodded, cutting into his steak. Finally able to enjoy some of the finer things in life, we've worked hard for it. I smiled and reached into my purse. That's wonderful. I'm so happy you've been able to afford such nice things. I pulled out a manila envelope and placed it on the table. I brought something to share with you too. Mom looked at the envelope curiously. What's that, sweetheart? Oh, just some interesting documents I came across. I thought you might want to see them. Dad's fork paused halfway to his mouth, and I caught a flicker of something. Fear in his eyes. I opened the envelope and spread the papers across the table, right next to the fine china. The estate documents, the trust agreements, the financial records showing every dollar they had spent. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's face went white as she recognized the letterhead. Dad set down his fork with a shaking hand. Sarah, Mom began, her voice barely a whisper. We can explain. Can you? I interrupted, my voice calm and steady despite the rage burning in my chest. Can you explain why you've been sitting on $847,000 that belonged to me for 3 years? Can you explain why you let me work 3 jobs and survive on ramen noodles while you were buying luxury cars with my inheritance? Dad cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. Now, Sarah, it's not that simple. We were protecting you. You weren't ready for that kind of responsibility. I wasn't ready? The calm facade cracked, and my voice rose. I wasn't ready to pay for my education without going into debt. I wasn't ready to have health insurance. I wasn't ready to live somewhere with reliable heating. We were going to tell you, Mom said desperately. We thought we should invest it, make it grow for you. I laughed, a harsh sound that made them both flinch. Invest it? Is that what you call the country club membership? Is that what you call your cruise to Europe? Your new BMW? I pulled out the financial investigator's report. Here's a breakdown of every dollar you've spent, $392,000 on yourselves over 3 years. Meanwhile, I've been paying 18% interest on student loans that I never should have needed. The room fell silent except for the sound of Mom's quiet crying. But here's the thing, I continued, gathering the papers back into a neat stack. Grandma Rose was smarter than you gave her credit for. She knew exactly what kind of people you were, and she planned for this possibility. I pulled out another set of documents, the penalty clauses, the backup trust, the legal consequences they now faced. According to the trust agreement, mismanagement of my inheritance carries a penalty of double restitution plus interest. That means you now owe me nearly $800,000 on top of returning what's left of my original inheritance. Dad's face had gone from white to gray. Sarah, we don't have that kind of money. I know you don't, I replied. I also know about your debts, your mortgages, your credit cards. You've been living beyond your means, assuming you'd always have access to my trust fund to bail you out. I stood up, looking down at the 2 people who had raised me, who had taught me about honesty and hard work while secretly stealing from me for years. But Grandma Rose thought of that too. She included provisions for exactly this scenario. I placed one final document on the table, a seizure order that would allow me to recover my losses through their assets. The vacation house, the cars, the investments you made with my money, all of it can be claimed to recover what you stole from me. The trust has legal authority to seize assets up to the full amount owed. Mom looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. Sarah, please. We're your parents. We made a mistake, but we love you. You love me? I shook my head. If you loved me, you wouldn't have watched me struggle for 3 years while you lived in luxury on my inheritance. If you loved me, you would have been honest with me. Dad tried one more desperate gambit. We'll make it right. We'll transfer the money immediately. We'll figure out how to pay the penalties. Oh, you will transfer the money immediately, I said. Mr. Whitmore has already initiated the process. But as for the penalties, I smiled, and I knew it wasn't a kind smile. That's where Grandma Rose's final surprise comes in. I reached into my purse one more time and pulled out a sealed envelope. She left this for me to give to you if you ever betrayed her trust. With trembling fingers, Mom opened the envelope and read the letter inside. As she read, her face crumpled completely. What does it say? Dad demanded. Mom handed him the letter with shaking hands. As he read, I watched years of arrogance and self-righteousness drain from his face. Grandma Rose's letter was simple but devastating. If you are reading this, it means you chose greed over family, dishonesty over love. You have stolen not just money, but trust, security, and years of your daughter's life. You taught her that family couldn't be counted on, that she was alone in the world. I am disappointed, but not surprised. I have known for years what kind of people you are, and I planned accordingly. The money you stole will be returned with penalties that will cost you everything you think you value. But more than that, you have lost something you can never get back. Your daughter's respect and love. I hope it was worth it. Rose Chen. The silence stretched on until I finally broke it. The seizure order goes into effect tomorrow, I said quietly. You'll keep this house and one car, I'm not heartless. But everything else will be sold to recover what you stole from me. I picked up my purse and headed toward the door, then paused and looked back at them one more time. There's one more thing. I've decided to honor Grandma Rose's wishes about family, the family that actually deserves it. I had discovered through my investigation that my parents had also hidden something else from me. I had a half-sister. Dad had had an affair 20 years ago, and there was a daughter, my sister, who had grown up in foster care because Dad had refused to acknowledge her. I've been in touch with Jennifer, I said, watching Dad's face go white at the mention of the name. My half-sister, the one you abandoned. She's a single mother working 2 jobs to support her daughter. Grandma Rose had actually tried to include her in the will, but you convinced her that Jennifer didn't exist. I pulled out one more document, a revised will that I had had drawn up. I'm using part of my inheritance to establish a trust fund for Jennifer and her daughter, the family that actually needs help, not the one that steals from their own children. Mom made a choking sound. Sarah, please. I'm done, I said simply. I'm done pretending we're a family. Real families don't steal from each other. Real families don't lie to each other for years. Real families don't watch their children struggle while they live in luxury. I opened the front door, then looked back one final time. Oh, and one more thing. I'll be spending Christmas this year with Jennifer and her daughter. We're going to Disneyland. Something I never got to do as a child because we couldn't afford it. Turns out we could have afforded it all along. I walked out of that house and never looked back. The legal process took 6 months to fully resolve. My parents lost the vacation house, the luxury cars, most of their investments, and had to take out a second mortgage on their home to pay the penalties. They were forced to downsize their lifestyle dramatically, moving from their upscale neighborhood to a modest apartment. But the money, as it turned out, was just the beginning of my inheritance. Through Jennifer, I gained a real family, one built on honesty, support, and genuine love. She and her daughter Maya became the sisters I never knew I needed. We spend holidays together, take vacations together, and support each other through life's challenges. I used my inheritance wisely. I paid off my student loans, bought a beautiful home with a guest room for Jennifer and Maya, and invested the rest in a mix of conservative and growth investments that would ensure long-term financial security. I also went back to school to get my master's degree, something I had always dreamed of but never thought I could afford. Most importantly, I learned the difference between family and relatives. My parents gave me DNA, but Jennifer and Maya gave me love, loyalty, and the kind of unconditional support that real family provides. 6 months after the confrontation, I received a letter from my mother. It was full of apologies, explanations, and pleas for forgiveness. She talked about how they had made a terrible mistake, how they were sorry, how they wanted to rebuild our relationship. I read it once, then filed it away without responding. Some betrayals are too deep to forgive. Some trust, once broken, can never be rebuilt. They had 3 years to do the right thing, 3 years to tell me the truth, 3 years to be the parents they claim to be. Instead, they chose to lie, to steal, and to watch me struggle while they benefited from my grandmother's generosity. But in the end, their betrayal led me to something even more valuable than money. It led me to understand what real family looks like, and it led me to Jennifer and Maya. Last week, Jennifer's daughter Maya asked me to help her with a school project about family trees. As we worked together, drawing connections and talking about relatives, she looked up at me with her bright 8-year-old eyes and said, "Aunt Sarah, I'm glad you found us." "Me too, sweetheart," I replied, thinking about the journey that had brought us together. "Me too. Sometimes the best revenge isn't what you take away from someone, it's what you build without them." My parents stole my inheritance, but in the end, they gave me something even more valuable. They showed me exactly who they really were, and they led me to discover the family I was meant to have. The inheritance Grandma Rose left me wasn't just money, it was the truth. And the truth, as it turns out, really can set you free. Today, I have financial security, a real family who loves and supports me, and the knowledge that I survived their betrayal and came out stronger. My parents have debt, guilt, and the knowledge that they traded their daughter's love for temporary luxury. I'd say that's justice served.